anyway because there were some issues that I wanted to address. Yeah, .new. Oh yeah, okay. It's like Ruby syntax. Okay. So is that going to work? Alternatively, what we can do, in fact, what we can do is create a duplicate, right? So that might be easier. So we create these shortcuts. Alternatively, we could save these resources on disk. And then load them at runtime. So that would look a little bit like this. Shortcuts, and would say player left 1 and make unique player left 2, save. This doesn't feel like a particularly good way of doing it. So player shoot 1. But I'm pretty sure this will work. New shortcut. Player shoot 2. Well, that's sort of what I've done. But the problem is that these control buttons, when I set up their shortcuts, the shortcut is actually a resource. So when I say that copy 1 is using the player 1 control button as a shortcut, it actually updates both sets of controls, and so only one player gets the shortcuts, and it just goes a bit crazy because even though we create new instances of the nodes, because resources normally are meant for static data, they're shared between all instances of this code. And that means, yeah, that there's an override there. I don't know if that makes sense. And I'm not too sure how to programmatically create that those resources. And the documentation says, why would you want to? It's probably not a good idea, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work, so I need to. So you should tell me how to do it, but you don't. That's fine. I could just create an instance. Let's have a look. What else can we do? Oh, shortcut, that's why it's not working. So we could do it this way as well. Shortcut.new. And then say button.shortcut cut dot shortcut equals input event action dot new, and oh yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it, I think. And then that's going to be dot action is equal to action string. So that way, actually, that way is even better, because that way we don't duplicate the resources on the file system, I think. Let's try that first, and if that doesn't work, then I will just load the resources from disk at runtime. Okay, so let's have a go.
Phase 1. Collect stars and weapons.
There we go. So now we've got our player 1 buttons. When I'm using the keyboard, it's also updating the buttons to show when those buttons are being pressed. And that's the same for player 2. Fantastic. So yeah, we didn't need to use the file system. We just needed to programmatically create the resources. So even though the documentation says you shouldn't normally need to do that, in special cases, we obviously need to do that. So cool. That looks like it's working. We need to hook up the shooting event again, but oh no, that seems to work as well. And the buttons are still growing correctly. Fantastic. So there was one more thing. I think. Oh no, that should be alright. That should be alright. Okay, so I've updated the GUI to auto scale as well, and these are now using the same node structures, and the inventory now has like a little bar here and a background. Cool. All right, so that has allowed us to synchronize the keyboard and the touch events. So that's a good sign. The next thing I was looking to do is to move the camera relative to the player's velocity. So yeah, now we have a single manager for the controls, the screen, and the scores. And that means that we don't essentially waste any pixels. So before we were rendering the viewport behind the control scheme, right? And that's just a whole lot of extra processing that we don't really need. So just got rid, essentially, and just consolidated all the GUI under this single screen split element. And this is as you can see, a box container. So it's actually a HBox container, right? So it's automatically going to split and stretch everything inside of this, depending on the stretch amount you give them. So this inventory system, I'm not too sure what I want for this long term. Right now it's a bit rudimentary, but I think we'll leave that for now. I think the score is large enough. I made it a little bit bigger. I think I want to update our buttons. Because I think they're getting way too dark when they're pressed. So let's go into this theme, and this is our shared control theme. And here we go. So I think we just want to grab the whole button system, and oh, I think we've already got that. Okay, cool. And the hover effect, I think we can change that a little bit. Okay. So we definitely don't need all this corner detail because we don't want rounded corners. And we definitely don't want any border radius on any of those either. Oops. For some reason, this doesn't seem to be wanting to play nice. Okay. Alright, so here we go. We'll have like a flat white, I guess. And we don't need any corner detail. And we'll have, I think, just a few pixels of border. I think the border we had before was just a bit too much. There we go. We definitely don't need any shadow. We don't need any anti-aliasing either. And I think just a little bit of content margin will always make sense. So that's just going to make sure that the icons have a minimal amount of space around them. Expand margin, okay. We might put some textures in these buttons eventually, but I think for now it's fine. We're just going to have a slight shade when you are hovering over it, and when you press the button, we are going to just darken it slightly. Although I guess we can get rid of the border. Okay, so when we hover, we want to add a border. And we actually want to increase, so we want to have that border stay during the hover state, and then we actually want to increase the content margin when we press it. And that will make it look like the icon is getting smaller. So here we had a black border. I realize it's not super impressive right now, these elements, but I do kind of just want to keep them